Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting in the tasting room of Sinor Lavallee in Avila Beach in the Slow Coast. And I'm sitting here with Mike Sinor, who is the owner and winemaker. So welcome, Mike, and tell us about your winery.
Well, thank you. Thank you, and welcome to Avila Beach. So, Sinor Lavallee was founded in 1997. My wife and I got married in Burgundy, France, in the town of Beaune. We both went to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo here in town, and I started working for wineries when I was 21 years old. And so, worked for 6 wineries here in the Edna Valley, Arroyo Grande Valley. Started working for Robert Mondavi in 1994 as he owned Byron Winery in Santa Maria. And then I got to go to France, Burgundy, to learn with Tim Mondavi and Ken Brown, and we decided to get married there. Came home and started Sinor Lavallee.
Wow. And so tell me, obviously we're in the Slow Coast, a mecca for Pinot and Chard. That's clearly what you do, but tell us about the grapes that you're growing, and do you have estates, or are you purchasing fruit, or a combination?
Great question. Yeah. So in 1997, we started the company and we started purchasing fruit. So we were just kids, trying to get it done. And we had the great fortune in 2004. I started purchasing from Brian Talley, actually, from Talley Vineyards and Winery in Arroyo Grande. So I had 1 acre of Rincon for 9 years there. It was under my kind of direction and got to make that wine. So we were buying fruit from different places. In 2013, due to our success in the wine business, my wife and I bought 100 acres here in Avila Beach.
Oh.
So we have a 30-acre vineyard overlooking the ocean here in Avila Beach. So our winery is all now estate.
Nice. So 30 acres, and what do you have planted there?
On our estate, we grow Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, Albarino, Syrah, Grenache, and a tiny bit of Aligote.
Wow. Okay. And what is your total case production, and where are your wines available?
So currently we're making about 1,000 cases right now. Mostly at tasting room. It really is a direct kind of company. We currently have distribution in California with Winebow, so it's all over California, but it's not a lot of distribution. It is still a pretty small company.
Well, wonderful. Now that we got that out of the way, I'm curious, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Oh my gosh. I'll go back to the first bottle of wine I had in my life. And now I was 21 years old and at Cal Poly. And
the first wine you ever had was at 21? You never drank before?
I drank a lot. No, I drank a lot. Yeah, I come from Visalia, California, the San Joaquin, and so, no, I drank a lot, too much. But I never had wine. Mm-hmm. So I grew up a classic. I like to tell people I grew up in the Midwest of California. That's Fresno. So, no, but I do remember a friend of mine, her name is Jennifer Hertz, and Jennifer is a friend of Cal Poly, and she said, hey, we're hiring out at this winery. I'd never thought about wine in my life. I'd never had a wine in my life. So I called them. They said, why don't you come in for an interview on Tuesday? Well, being a Cal Poly kid, I drank my first 3 bottles Monday night. So, and that was it. That was the first time I had wine. I came in the next day and took the interview and got the job in the wine business.
And then you got bit by the bug.
I did. Within months, I just really got into it. I also had to pay a fair amount of my school, so I always had to work. And that's where Corbett Canyon Winery was the winery here in the Edna Valley. And but then very quickly, I got on the phone and I got introduced to people, but I also made cold calls. And I said, hey, look, my dad had a junkyard, right? So I can weld, machine, drive an 18-wheeler, and land a small plane. So, and I show up early and I work late. And they said, okay. So Claiborne, Churchill, Sausalito Canyon, Pierre Creek, I worked for all those guys going through Cal Poly.
Wow, amazing. So while you remember the first wine you drank a lot of it. I'm not sure if you remember specifically what you were drinking, but clearly you have spent a long time in this industry and traveled around. I'm wondering if there was one wine that stands out as one of those aha moments, something that it could have been at the early part of your career or maybe a significant, but what was the wine and what was the significance?
Oh, yes. I know this wine. So this wine, flashing back to 1994, I got that job working for Ken Brown at Byron Winery. And within the first month or two, we had a comparative tasting. And so I was, at that time, if you can imagine, as a young kid, I'm really into Zinfandel because I worked for Sausalito Canyon. I'm not I'm not experienced in the wines of the world. I was very experienced in the Central Coast wines because I worked for wineries, and I went to Santa Barbara, and Paso Robles had 15 wineries at the time. And so, I was a local at that point. Well, Ken Brown and Tim Mondavi, being the world-class guys they are, we drink world-class wines. So on the table, I had a 1990 Domaine Loire. I believe it was her Corton Renard, or her Corton, but it was the Pinot Noir that set me on the path. It drank just inspiringly and just fired me up. And I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't know what Pinot Noir was until I had that Loire 1990 Pinot Noir.
Wow. So, as you said, you were very Central Coast focused and knew that. And then, of course, you got engaged in Beaune and have traveled to France and drunk some good wine. And I know that you have some empty bottles here in your tasting room of like every Domaine de la Romanie Conti. So you've clearly drunk really good wine. But if we were to come into your home, what would we find in your cellar? What do you have? Is it all Pinot? Is it other grapes from where in the world?
The answer is yes. The one thing you won't find is Sinor Lavallee. So, yeah, the one thing that I was told by some of my mentors was do not fall in love with what you do. So this industry for me is my passion. It's what I do. It's who I am. But I don't have the luxury of falling in love with what I do. It's my job to do what I do and do it better. So when you come to my house, we'll be drinking wines from Spain. We'll be south of France, as much Burgundy as I can afford. Oregon. I got buddies in Willamette that I love drinking their wine. So, no, in my house, we drink great wine, not from here.
And is there a bottle you recently opened up from your cellar that drank really well?
I did. Actually, for this week, I happened to have a birthday. And so I went in and found a wine from Chile, a Cinsault, that was made by a gentleman named Pedro Parra. So Pedro Parra, if you know this gentleman, but he's from Chile, and he has a doctorate in terroir. So he's actually a geologist, I think, by trade. And I was introduced to him by Ted Vance, a friend who's got an import company out of Portugal. Him and I worked at Byron back in the day, and he has a very high-end import company. And so he introduced me to Pedro Parra, and so I chose that bottle for dinner this last Tuesday.
Wow. So do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Oh, as a perfect variety. That's such a subjective, great question. I think there is, but more importantly, there's a perfect variety for a perfect location, for the perfect people, in the perfect weather.
That leaves it nice, wide, and open.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously Pinot Noir is my passion. It still drives me. But as far as a perfect varietal, I think to put it down to one, obviously it would be Pinot Noir, but I like the diversity.
And, you're a small producer. 1,000 cases is not a lot. How do you feel about wine critics and scores? How do they play a role with you as a wine drinker or as a winemaker?
Oh, I think it plays a good role. I think it's an important part of what we do because there's no change in it. It's so, and it really does. It helps people. When I go to buy a car, I'm going to go find a reviewer to talk about cars. Mm-hmm. So if people are going to buy wine, they're going to go read about from somebody, and they're going to read about wine. So what I really like is that today's world is much more wide open than it was 25 years ago. There were only a few players 25 years ago, and they had a very strong voice, very impactful. Today's media is a lot less impactful, honestly, but I think more relevant because there's more intimacy today than we had before. Before there was gatekeepers, and even before that, when you look back at Gerald Asher, if you remember back, he wrote for Bon Appetit, that's the old guard, and those people were getting paid off behind the scenes, then Robert Parker comes around with his mimicking the Consumer's Advocate. I mean, I forget that gentleman's name, but he really didn't take money from him. It was very independent as he could be, and a spectator. So I think today I love it that it's very open. I love that it's transparent, and we have to just. And sometimes it's not as accurate, but hey, life's sometimes not that accurate.
So for you as a wine drinker, quick fire answer: red, white, or rosé?
Rosé.
Wow. Still or sparkling?
Still.
Rosé.
Yeah.
Impressed. And of course, Pinot Noir, you're a Pinot Noir producer, and everyone knows that Pinot is one of the easiest wines to pair with food, one of the friendliest wines. But how do you approach food and wine pairing? Do you think there are rules to follow? Are there guidelines you follow? Or is it a come what may attitude, or any little tips?
Well, my role or my thought on food and wine pairing is a lot like life. There's rules, okay? And it's very important to learn the rules, because the best way to break the rules is to learn the rules. So, yeah, you need to have a foundation of how things work. I was inspired most certainly by a master of wine, Tim Hanai. So Tim Hanai came to town years ago and gave us some seminars. And so, I learned the basics of it, and I know the basics of it, and the sauces and the fats and what goes with what. But I tell you what, I love to just get kind of crazy and just have that fun exposure. And, one of my all-time favorite is our white label Chardonnay with little cheddar cheesy, those little fish crackers for the kids. It's a great combination,
I'm curious now. So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure of tasting your wines, what do you think they're missing out on?
I think they're missing out on a very clear sense of place. That's really the mind's eye. For me, is the story is the soil, the storyteller is the wine, and it's my job to maestro that together.
So if space aliens were to land on your property right now, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with?
I think we'd start with the Pet Nat, the sparkling, because it's time to celebrate, man. I want to party with you, cowboy. It's like, where are you from, man? And do you guys grow grapes?
And it's a Pet Nat of Pinot Noir.
It is, yes. It's a method ancestral made with Pinot Noir from our estate.
So you've been in this area for a long time now, and you have your own vineyard. So we know you spend time in the vineyard, and we know that every vintage tells a story. How much do you see a commonality from year to year, or do you see big differences?
Oh, I definitely see differences. I think due to the current Earth situation and global weather change that we're dealing with, things are different, pretty different than we had before. Our challenges today are very different than the challenges that I was training for 25 years ago. We used to have rain at harvest time. Everybody's stressed over it.
Rain? What's that?
Yeah, exactly. And now we'd take harvest. But now we have heat storms, and so things are very different, and it does affect the way I create wines. I can say personally for Sinor Lavallee is they are very reflective of the vintage.
And so, do you have any omens, or are there any signs that you look for that are going to help you determine what a vintage is going to give you?
Oh, certainly. I take a look at a lot of things, and especially in springtime, the time we're right now, in which trees bud first. I'm looking at fruit trees. I'm looking at some ornamental trees around the vineyard, and they come out earlier or later. Those are good signs. Water, as I'm sure you've heard, but whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. So the amount of rain we have and when that comes is paramount to what we do. So that's going to really dictate how we're going to do what we're going to do.
So in the years that you've been here, have you established any good luck rituals that you do at the start of harvest?
Yeah. We do, there's always champagne, we like to broke up in the champagne for sure. We do. There's some things that I have changed the last couple of years, for my life, because I was pretty strict for most of my career. And so during the Tour de France, I would quit shaving. So as the start of the tour, I would quit shaving, and no haircuts and no shaving until the last grapes were brought in. So there's some pictures on the internet of me. It looks very different from what we see today with
with your buzz cut and clean shaven face.
It is. Once I went fully gray, I just don't rock the long hair anymore. So the hair was a big thing that I did, and a lot of us, and I've heard this from other friends, media, that there's something about the Central Coast. We always kind of we look homeless. All the winemakers look homeless during harvest season for whatever reason. So I love that.
You're all working very hard, and you're picking at 3 a.m. So,
as you know, that is season for squeezing.
Yeah. So talking about being in the vineyard, not at maybe this is at 3 a.m, maybe at other times. When you're walking through your vineyard, what's your relationship with your grapes? I know you know them pretty well. Are you talking to your grapes? Do you find that it's beneficial to speak to them, or do you speak to your wine when it's in the barrel?
I think it's more important to listen. And that's really what our job is to do. And terroir, everybody talks about terroir in sense of place, right? The soil, the slope, the aspect, the clone, the rootstock, but it's also the souls of the people around it. And so that's my role, is to listen. So, and I'm listening to the grapes, but I'm also listening to the bugs. I'm also listening to the wind. I'm digging holes, and I'm sensing everything. It's not the grapes are there, but it's the tendrils. It's the aspect. It's the flora and fauna around the vineyard itself. All that needs to be listened to make the right decision when the time comes.
So now that we have that out of the way, I'm curious. You said that wine was not something you even knew about till you were 21 years old. So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, that's a good question. So from when I was in junior high until I was in, junior high to my senior year in high school, I wanted to be an underwater welder. So I got certified as a scuba diver when I was 12 years old. And then from my junior year in high school until I was 21 years old, I was training to be a high school shop teacher. So I went to Cal Poly and studied industrial technology, and I wanted to teach shop class.
Wow. And so I'm wondering, when you're not working, how do you spend your free time? Are you welding underwater, or?
No, it's funny. I really got far away from all of my technology because I was afraid of being pigeonholed in the cellar as a cellar rat, the guy that could fix things. Mm-hmm. And so when I went to Byron Winery, I didn't tell anybody I could. But yeah, what I do today, it's my fun. My kids are 22 and 20, so hanging with them is always a good time, for the most part. But bicycles are a big passion of mine. I love to mountain bike and road bike. But most recently, in the last several months, since December of I'll call it 4 months or so, I purchased a motorcycle. So I have taken on this sport of dual sport, adventure motorcycling. So an off-roading and on-roading with the same motorcycle.
Wow.
So yeah, that's my new passion.
And curious, you said that you and your wife started this winery together, that you proposed and got married in Beaune. I'm curious what sort of wines that get open to make for a romantic evening. I mean, I'm going to guess if you open something from Beaune, memories come back. But is there anything specific that excites you or, that she prefers?
Burgundy is probably the go-to. We drink a lot of white wine, I'm 52 and our bodies are like, hey, so we love white wine. Chardonnay is without a doubt the world's finest, best, and expensive white wine. Chardonnay is awesome when done correctly. So for my wife, I would open a beautiful bottle of Chardonnay from, somewhere, or Corton Charlemagne if I could, if I got the money.
So, you mentioned a couple things along the way about how you never, get involved with your own wine. You don't have it at home and you don't collect it. And you said something else, that were pieces of advice that you've been given. And I mean, maybe what you've said already is sufficient, but I'm wondering, is there a piece of advice that you carry with you in your work ethic or in your life that someone shared with you along the way? It could be a mentor, a family member.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Just do work. I mean, just stay. Be a verb. Action. Action is better than non-action. Even if you make a mistake. So I make a lot of mistakes, but I get a lot of things done too. So I think be a verb. Be action.
I like that. And if you could give our listeners a piece of advice, what would you tell them?
Get to San Luis Obispo coast and get here. Get these wines. See the people. This is a part of Earth that's pretty unique. And even if you've traveled all over the world for wine, to be with Brian Talley, and in approximately 8.5 to 10 minutes, you're surfing at Pismo Beach is very unique. And so get to slow, have a good time.
So complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
Never heard of it.
I want you to imagine a scenario. We're sitting at a table, we're drinking your wine, and we have an empty chair. From any walk of life, living or deceased, who would you want to share a bottle of your wine with?
Oh, without a doubt, it would be Henri Jaillet, period. Yeah. I mean, I'd never had an audience with him, but I studied his life. I remember the day he died. I was picking Talleyrand, and so yeah, Henri Jayer. For the wine side would be Henri Jayer. For life, it would be my grandfather.
And when you look back at your career, because, I mean, obviously family is important, but when you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Still being here after all these years, I mean, this business is wonderful, but it's hard, So the fact that that I set a goal down in my life and I'm achieving that goal, and I also am proud that all along the way, the relationships I've maintained, and I just love the people more so than other things in this business. I think that's one of the highlights of this industry for anybody getting in this industry. I think the best part of it, the wine's great, but the process is better.
Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago that obviously things have changed when we talked about vintages and how climate change is affecting. You think we're going to be drinking wine in 300 years?
Without a doubt. Yeah, we'll be drinking great wine 300 years because we adapt and overcome. That's what we do. So those who do will be here. Those who don't won't be drinking wine.
So if they're verbs, they'll be here.
That is correct. Actually, that's exactly right. So yeah, no, we'll be drinking great, awesome wine in 300 years. I have not a doubt.
Well, if on the off chance you had to go to a deserted island, what 3 wines would you take with you?
What 3 wines would I take with me? Well, I would definitely take that Luaz Corton. That would definitely be there. I think for a white wine, I would probably go with, I don't know. I think DRC has some Corton Charlemagne now, which is kind of new in their book, so I got to take some of that. And then the other one I would take, I think I would take, I don't know, I would just take an early Pinot Noir from Tally. I think I remember the 89s, was really good. I thought those wines were inspiring me back then. So I'd love to have an old Central Coast, probably Tally Pinot Noir.
Love it. Okay, time for our little game where we pair wine and music. We're going to go through your wines, some of your wines, and I want you to tell me what kind of it conjures up in terms of how that wine makes you feel music-wise, like what you'd want to be listening to.
Okay.
So you mentioned before your Pet Nat, ancestral sparkling wine made with Pinot Noir.
I would pair that with this song called Gratitude by the Beastie Boys.
You're gonna be easy on this one. Your Chardonnay white label Bassi Vineyard, I tasted that yesterday. It's more of your Burgundian homage.
That's a Charlie Parker. For me, that's a Charlie Parker, that Latin album. Can't think of the name of it, but there's a Latin album by Charlie Parker. There we go, good with that.
And your estate Chardonnay, maybe you can describe what makes up it's all from your vineyard, and the style of it is?
The estate is right down the middle. As you see on the list here, we call white label wines and black label wines. Those are playing on the edges. Those are things that you maybe shouldn't do. But I like to do them, And so for us, the white label wines are always harvested earlier in the ripening cycle, very low sugar, they result in low alcohol. And the black label wines are harvested pretty extreme sugar, heavy extraction. So the estate is right down the middle. One of my mantras is to make the wine as complex as possible, as early as possible. Okay, so that's a major pillar to what we do. And so, an example, in the 2015 vintage, I created 42 different Pinot Noirs from 15 acres. So those range from 10% alcohol to 17.5% alcohol, maybe. So I'm going to curate those into the final wine, and that estate is our terroir. That, to me, is what I was trained to do, and it represents the place the best.
So your estate Chardonnay?
For music-wise, I think that's it's something fun. It's current. Revelation, it's Revelation's a local reggae band, so it's a beachy, fun wine.
Love it. Okay, what about your estate Pinot?
Estate Pinot, that steps it up a bit in intensity for me, and so, but so the estate Pinot Noir, as far as music-wise, I would be thinking more of Charlie Hunter. So Charlie Hunter is a bit of an eclectic guitarist that plays an 8-string, half bass, half guitar.
And the last one, I find this to be a very interesting wine, your Carbonic Pinot Noir.
Oh, Carbonic Pinot Noir is definitely There's an instrumental trip hop band called Us3, and trip hop would be a great one for that.
Well, Mike, I mean, we could keep going down your list, but, I'm respecting your time here. I'm curious, last question, 2 parts. First is, what winemaking region in the world is next on your bucket list to go explore?
I would have to say the island of Corsica.
And for our listeners who maybe put Avila Beach on the top of their bucket list, it is the new Slow Coast AVA. How can they find you, and where can they find you?
So you can always find me here in Slowtown, we call it. How to get here? Go to Google. Google Sinor, and you'll get here. Google San Luis Obispo, and you'll find us. But more succinctly, go to slowwinecoast.com, and you'll be able to get to us.
And your tasting room is in the town of Avila Beach.
It is. Actually, we're at 550 First Street in Avila Beach. So we're lucky to have one stoplight in town. And so you come to that stoplight, make a left. We're the first business on the left.
And when are you open?
We're open 7 days a week from noon to 6. Ready for tastings. And then we have another ancillary experience here called the Avila Beach Shuck Shack. So we just started that. It's kind of a fun thing to do, something different in the backyard. It's a pretty fun location, but it's one of the few places in California that you can buy oysters and shuck them yourself right here at the beach. And so we don't shuck them in the tasting room, but people can buy and these oysters come from Morro Bay Oysters, fresh from the water every Thursday. So they come out of the water, people grab a bag of oysters, go in the backyard, shuck some oysters, and drink some wine.
It's pretty amazing, and you are across the street from the beach, so a perfect setting. So head to Avila Beach, come check out these wines. Sinor Lavallee, meet Mike. Maybe he'll be here, but you cannot miss the pet nat with the oysters. An amazing pairing. So, Mike, thanks for joining us today on Wine Soundtrack, and I hope you had a good time.
I did. Thank you for being here and enjoying Slow Coast.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.